How to give an elevator pitch. Hey, I'm Donnie Bovine, the CEO and founder of Success Champion Networking and author of Fuck to Focus. This is Growth Mode, a podcast all about growing and scaling your business. Hanging out with me as always is the introverted sales and automated tactician and genius. And this episode, we're going to walk through what do you actually say when someone walks up and says, "Nice to meet you," or "What do you do?" And I remember the first networking meeting I ever went to in my entire life. I, went, and in my head, I thought I was going to like this business AA meeting, right? Where it sounded like a bunch of people were going to go sit in a room and go, "Hi, I'm Donnie. I'm a sales guy. Hi, Donnie." You get the whole freaking thing through it. But I remember in that room, they were doing this thing where they called it an elevator pitch or like a 60-second introduction, something that told people what they do. And they were going around this freaking room. And let me tell you, I got intimidated really damn quick because these people, not only were they saying, what they did, these people had rhymes and jingles and songs. And I remember as it got closer and closer to me, all I could think about was I have no fucking clue what I'm going to say here. And when it finally got to me, the only thing I could think of was to stand up and actually pitch the room, printing, because that's what I sold at the time. And that just failed miserably. So as we dive into today's episode, Kevin and I are going to walk you through. We both have a little bit different styles when it comes to introducing ourselves. There's a lot of theories that are similar, but he likes to get a lot more tactical than I do. That's what we're going to talk about. And we're also going to talk a little bit about, because you guys seem to be digging on the introvert extroverted things, a little bit, more tactical for the introvert and how they have to step up their game when they tell people what they do. So, Gavin, how do you want to roll with this one?
So I remember when I started doing the elevator pitches too, and the response I would get from people who had been doing them for a lot longer than me is I still don't know what you do. And I thought I had this really badass introduction, about what I did and how awesome it was. And you're like, "Yeah, I don't know what you do." I'm like, "Oh, fuck. God damn it." So, and that's really where
we've all been there, right? We've all sat across from somebody and they're sitting there rambling on, and you're like, "I'm fucking clueless. I got no idea."
Yeah, and then I happened to meet this guy from England at a conference I was at named Andy Bounds, who taught me how to do an introduction. And it was basically his entire presentation that he was at was talking about how to do a really good elevator pitch. And it's all, for me now, it's all focused about how I help people. What are the end results? Instead of saying, "Hey, I do digital marketing and I do email and blah, blah, blah." And I'll also throw that stuff in sometimes. But now it's really focused on the outcomes. And here I help businesses do this. I help business owners have this thing happen in their lives. And really, because then people ask, "Oh, really? How do you do that?" And then I can talk about my stuff because now they ask, now they're interested. And I'm not going to like go over the top of their heads or get risk, because I'm high C and I like features and I like bells and whistles. I'm not going to get too deep into the techie stuff. And it's not going to be awkward for them because they don't, no one wants to say, "I don't know what you just said." And so most people will just walk away
or smile and nod, right?
Or smile and nod, exactly. And then they still won't know what you do and you'll never have any more interaction with them. So, for me, it's really about outcomes now. And I think that's the key thing to talk about because people understand outcomes. It's the other stuff they don't understand.
Yeah, I like that idea. And I think the struggle for a lot of people, even myself through all the years I've been selling, is when you try and tell somebody what you do, there's a lot of thoughts that go through your head. Is this person a prospect? Is this somebody I'm just going to network with? Is this, somebody that I need to, get information from, can they help me get some, right? So there's all these thoughts running through your head. And I think that's what causes people to jumble it up. And I would also challenge that I think that a lot of people who aren't in a traditional business, when I say traditional business, I mean like an insurance or financial stuff or IT or roofing, maybe, there's not a cut and dry black and white on what you actually do. So there's always this compelling need to feel like you got to actually explain to them what you do, which just immediately turns people off. I remember when I did learn a dumb jingle selling commercial printing. It was I sell commercial printing and junk mail that actually works was my little freaking whatever jingle punchline on the end of it. And that junk mail that worked, really helped people remember. It never got me a lick of business. For me, it's you got to dumb it down to the smallest, simplest, easiest thing in the world. And I think get very, very black and white with what you do.
Yeah, I think part of the problem for a lot of people is that they look at the pitch and they do the exact same thing that they do. And let's stop calling it a pitch because you're not actually pitching. They look at that
Right.
that introduction or we call it a Champions Minute in Success Champions Networking. They look at that little 30 to 60 snippet introduction the same way they look at their telemarketing and their prospecting, where they're just trying to tell everything at once. They're throwing up on their prospect or the person in front of them, instead of identifying, here's what I need to do to get a follow-up conversation. Here's what I need to do for this specific thing. People don't know what the outcome of that introduction is supposed to be. They don't know what they're trying to get to.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that are trying to avoid the flinch. Like, if you can sit across from a financial advisor, they've said they're a financial advisor enough that they know people have a natural reaction or something to it, or their health insurance, right? Or, one of those fields where you go to an event and there's 10,000 of them in the room.
Yep.
They're trying to avoid that flinch. And that's what really gets them in trouble, because now they say things like, I help people build wealth and legacy and long-term blah, blah. Shut the fuck up. Nobody cares.
What is building legacy? That's
right,
really
right.
innocuous of what it actually is.
So I'm going to dive in years because you got a very specific way of saying it, which I think is very effective. And it does help people really wrap their head around it. It doesn't work for me because it's just not my style of telling people what I do. So, my style is very cut and dry. I will tell them very black and white. When I sold commercial printing, I sell commercial printing. When I sold sales training, I sell sales training. As we're doing networking groups, I run networking groups. If we're talking about Champions Table, I run a business mastermind. If we talk about the Badass Business Summit, I do a business growth summit. And I keep it very black and white and very simple, because for me, my next move is more important than telling them what I actually do. And I have to also put this with context of where I am in a moment. If I'm in a group of people, the only thing I give a shit about is telling them specifically who I need to be introduced to, right? I don't care that they know what I do, right? Very specifically, I need them to know who I need to get introduced to. If I'm at an event out in public, I don't give a shit if they know what I do at all. I want to figure out who they are and what doors I can open for them. So my entire idea of any sort of elevator, how do you tell people what you do, is to quickly get the damn thing off of me, so I can do what I need to do to be successful in this adventure.
You heard it. The high D doesn't want the spotlight on him all the
time. No, wait, there's a difference. There's a difference, right? If owning that room is going to get me what I need to get, then I'm going to own the whole damn room.
I know. I just liked how you said it's like, get it off me. I'm like, that's not something Donnie says very often. It's like, ooh, look at me. I'm Donnie.
I don't know if we should say that out loud. Get it off me is not something you say very often.
Well,
I mean, that was the out loud voice. Jesus.
I used to have a filter.
But yeah, fuck a filter. It's overrated anyways. But I do, Kevin, honestly like the way you specifically walk through people, and when you explain people how to actually do this proper property, like you're gonna sell when you tell them to do this properly, they really fucking lean into you walking them through step by step how to say it, and I think it really gets your whole outcome philosophy out there. And I think for the introverts that may be listening to the show, there's a ton of value in following this specifically step by step.
So it's 4 steps. And this is what I learned from Andy Bounds back on the stage years and years and years ago. And it's still what I use and what I teach people. So if he's listening to this podcast, thank you. So the first step is,
that was so sweet.
I'm pretty sure that conference was also the one that I learned that, the first 3 times you use someone else's idea, you have to credit them. And then after that,
right. I was going to say, at this point, just fucking own it.
Because
I've heard you say this about a bajillion times. So.
Yeah. And I like giving him credit because he was really good. It was instrumental to me figuring this out. So,
and it's funny is we teach this as a part of our ongoing classes, as a part of Success Champion Networking, to help give them a framework, because a lot of people have never been taught, whether by their company or going through some training program, how to actually tell people what you do.
Yeah, so there are 4 steps in this introduction. They're super easy. Step 1 is I help people. And I'll give you all 4 steps and we'll come back and we can talk about each one in depth a little bit. I help people like I did with, which caused them to, and I would like an introduction to. And really, if you're in like a public networking thing, you can really leave it to that first one. I help people. So, Donnie likes to be really upfront with people. I sell commercial printing. I run a business mastermind, which helps people do this. I do digital marketing, which helps people do this. I do sales automation, which helps people do this. And it can be really super easy. If you're trying to get deeper with people and actually want to, get them to ask you questions and potentially make introductions or referrals for you, then you can go into the other stuff and get a little deeper. I do sales automation and I help people do this, like I did which is step 2, and is telling a story about a client, of where they are at, what issues they're having, the impact it was having on their business and their life, and then what you did to help.
And I think one of the key components that people need to remember in there, this is still supposed to be precise, very concise. Yep. Kevin and I have both watched Kevin teach people this process and then go around trying to explain it. And when they get to like I did part, all of a sudden they want to go in this 5-minute diatribe of this story. We're like, no. Give us a fucking highlight reel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need all the details.
Yeah, like it should be a sentence or maybe 2 at the most. But you remember, we teach people to do this 4 steps in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's really short and sweet. I help people with sales automation, like I did with Donnie. He broke his email system. He was frustrated because no communication was going out. So I helped him fix it and make his emails actually get people to reach out to him, which caused him to grow his business.
Well, and I love that. And that's all true, by the way. The other great thing about, this is you people out here listening to it going, but what if I have fucking 50 million things that I do for companies? Cool.
Awesome.
Make one of these for every one of the fucking things you do. And use it at different appropriate times, especially if you're in like a networking situation where you're meeting with the same people each week. Use a different one each fucking week. I mean, people should not be able to do your champions, minute, your 30-second introduction, your elevator pitch, whatever the fuck you want to call it. People should not be able to say the words for you. because that just means you're saying the same stupid shit every time you see him.
I do like the concept of people being able to do my Champions Minute for me because they understand what I do and who I work with and how I help, and being able to come up with their own. But yes, if they can recite your introduction with you, you're doing it wrong.
So I'm going to challenge this thought process just because I'm still rolling towards the introduction versus referrals. And most people, when we tell that story, that's getting us to the end game user, right? And we know there's more value in finding referrals. So make sure we're defining referrals as, there's a sales conversation expected to have at that outcome. I'm looking specifically for introductions to people. So if I'm only focused on the end user every time I tell that, then it's pointless at some point to keep saying it.
Yeah, and the cool thing is with this is it doesn't have to be focused on the end user. You could totally
Right.
create this and craft it around who you need to be introduced to because they know your end users. I can do this same process around web designers or around business coaches, and who both work with people who need my services, and really focus on people making introductions to me.
Yeah, because like in your case, it's a lot about getting to the people who have the unique personalities that they already work with. So it would be saying something along the lines of, I'm trying to get to people that work with these loudmouth, crazy ass freaking personalities.
Or, there's also the whole thing about what value do you bring to, for me, that web designer, or what value do I bring to that business coach, so that when people are making that introduction, they're like, oh, dude, he can totally help you do this. I can't wait for you two to have a conversation. And it helps people understand why those introductions are key, because they understand the value you bring to being in front of that person. Obviously we're going to get introductions because people just think we're cool and want us and think, oh, you need to talk to this person. They're going to come up with their own ideas, but giving them that guidance where, hey, these are the key people I need to be introduced to because they know my future clients. And here's how I make them look great is going to really, I think, speed along that whole introduction process. Like for the web designers, for me, it's, hey, I make your websites convert even better. Your websites now get better results. Same thing for business coaches. I actually help your clients implement your stuff.
I had a thought because I feel like if I was listening to this, one of the questions I would be is like, okay, cool. This is great if I've got time to do, because 30, 60 seconds sometimes sounds like a long amount of time. But if I'm at an event, an after hour, a trade show, and the likes, how do you change it up when you're out talking to people that still accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish?
So I think it's like I said before, you just do step one. I help people do this. I run a business mastermind, and I help people get out of their own way and actually scale their businesses.
And see, and I'm curious because I want to understand, because I wouldn't do the second half of that. Why do you include the second half of that?
I like the outcome piece, because when I say, hey, here's what the outcomes I get, usually the question they'll be asked, oh, how do you do that? And now I can talk about myself.
Yeah.
So,
and see, I won't. And that's why I won't do it, because I don't want it to kick back to me.
And for me, I want to be able to talk a little bit, and then I can control the conversation, and I can.
And I think that's the difference between the introvert extrovert, because you need to have a more process style.
And because
conversation,
I will always get the conversation back on them as quickly as possible, but I want them to be able to say, oh, that's cool, that's awesome, and then be able to have those conversations as we're going. Because eventually I'm going to ask them who they need to be introduced to, who's a good introduction for them. I want them to be thinking about, what I do and start thinking about who they know that's an introduction for me as well. So I want to give them enough information where they have a concept of what I do. Obviously, I'm not going to go into details about how I do the automation, how I do process design, all that type of stuff. But I want them to know the effect and why the benefit for introducing me to someone is. So, and it's only
this
15 minutes. I do a 15-minute introduction when I talk to people. It's only like 15 seconds. So it's not like a really long thing.
So, and I like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I still wouldn't do that style because my value in sitting across from somebody and understanding is like you said, I want to understand who to introduce them to. I don't care if they know who I introduce them to because, and the way I continue to look at this and the way I'm continuing to evolve with this, I'm going to grow my business, right? I'm going to be outside of networking, selling, getting things done, and bringing on business. And I don't need this person in a moment to be able to introduce me to anybody else. I'm going to introduce them fast first, make sure their world moves and evolves because I don't need this moment of time. Right. So I think as I continue to think about how I do things, in this capacity, it's why do I do the things that I do? And I think to that point, a lot of it is I don't need this conversation. I need to understand how I can best support, help, and grow them because I'm going to take care of myself someplace else outside of this immediate moment. And I think that's where I find myself often wanting to be very short, precise, and kick it straight to them.
And I think for me, it also depends on who I'm talking to because, once I figure out who they are and what they do, I may want that conversation at that moment because it sets me up to be able to have another conversation where we can dive deeper. So it's really, you need to be situationally aware of what's going on at that event, who you're talking to. And a lot of times, I'll do that opening, we'll talk a little bit and I'll ask them a bunch of questions and they won't be someone that is going to be able to help me at all. So then it is really focused on who else do they need to meet in the room? Who can I introduce them to? How can I help them? And then moving on to the next one. But, I want to have, for me, I want them to have enough of a foundation, just like I want to have enough of a foundation for them to make decisions about if there is a reason to have an ongoing conversation. So, because, it's like we teach everyone in the How to Network Without Being a Jackass. You don't know what those conversations are going to bring. So I don't want to just, not focus on them and not give them enough where they can make a decision that this is a good conversation they need to have, or that, who knows who they know or what they did in past lives. So I want to make sure I'm giving them
I think
that
this
info.
is going to be I think this is going to be a conversation we continue to explore because as I can, like I said, continue to wrap my head around this, I think that a lot of people, because they are likely not doing things outside of networking, have a high need for people to understand what they do from introductions, referrals, and the likes. And I think that if you can provide enough value in a moment and they have an inkling of what you do, you open doors for them and totally blow up their world. And they're going to dive further than you. At least that's been my experience over the years.
Yeah, the other reason I threw that, I help people into that initial introduction after I do this is because normally people didn't know what sales automation was. So I'd still have to tell them because they would just immediately ask. Sure. So now I just got it out of the way. So it was right up front. So now they didn't have to feel stupid because they didn't know what it was, even though they might be for not knowing. So,
dude, that's a valid point because anytime you confuse people or make them feel uncomfortable, or it's like using an acronym they don't know what they mean, yep, you almost immediately end the conversation because they don't want to look dumb, hurt your feelings, or anything else by going, what is that?
Yep.
Unless you're a high D who doesn't give a shit and he's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. So it's just easier to say, I do sales automation and I help people with this, and then we can move on to the conversation. So that was just my response to what was me not doing a good job of introducing myself and people saying I still don't know what you do. So I had
No, I like it. Oh, I'll cut you
oh
off.
no, that's fine. You do you.
So I think the biggest thing for you guys is to take what works for you. I mean, and use the methodology that keeps it quick. As Kevin and I both agree, you want to kick the spotlight over to them as quickly as possible and make it about them. Pour into the world so you know who to open doors for, and make sure that you concisely and precisely, whether it's my style or Kevin's, tell them very specifically, what you do, and on Kevin's side of things, really specifically get to the outcomes.
And it's really important. And this just popped in my head. You need to pay attention to their reactions to what you're saying, because that's going to be your keys and your signals that, all right, so what I just said actually made sense. And that was a good thing that I said. I need to remember it so I can say it again to someone else. And that's how you make your introductions better, is by actually paying attention to how people react to it. If you can see, because you can literally see when they get it and the lights go off in their eyes, and you're like, all right, so now I got to remember what I just said. Otherwise, you're going to be at your next, so it's like, oh, what did I say last time? And you won't remember. So you got to pay attention.
Yeah,
and you got to be present.
I just wrote that down for a future episode to fully talk about body language and sales and selling. I don't think we've covered that yet, which is a huge topic.
Yeah, I think that'll be awesome.
But as always, yeah, it'll be huge. As always, guys, if you got any tips, tricks, any value out of this episode, please do us a favor. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening to podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review and share this episode out with one person. That will mean the world to us. As always, love you, mean it. See you, bye.